All right, go ahead, Kathy.
This is Kathy Hagler, and this is Your Superior Self.
Ooh, I like that. That was very professional. Thank you, Kathy, for joining us. You look magnificent. Thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, it's great to be here, Trey.
Oh, I just threw this on. It was in my closet. I just threw it on.
It's in my closet.
This old thing.
This whole thing.
So we're here to talk about your journey, your new book, Art of Scars. Yeah. So why don't you give everyone kind of like a background on you? I mean, you have a huge resume, fantastic resume, very, very interesting. Why don't you give some of the listeners out there a little heads up about what you're about?
Well, I'm from a little town in New Mexico called Clovis, New Mexico. I come from a blue-collar background. My dad made signs, and my mother worked in the dentist office. I started taking piano when I was 4. I started teaching piano when I was 12. So part of what I am about is I think I'm an artist. So part of the reason I call it Art of Scars is because I like the art part of me. But I'm also an educator. I spent a lot of my time in education. I'm a math teacher. Started as a dean of a college when I was 29, and then I decided I would start my own company, and I've been doing that. And I've had some really, really good mentors. I don't know how many of you've heard of Dr. Edward Deming, but he was the gentleman who actually went to Japan and helped them rebuild Japan after Hiroshima. The conversation, I traveled with him for a couple of years, which was amazing. And he told me, he said, the reason I want you to travel with me is, he said, I love math and music, and you do too. So I think we have a lot in common. So we really linked at the level of loving math and music. It was interesting because he told me one day, I said, well, how did you end up doing your work in Japan? And he said, well, I was in my study one evening after I just taught a class on statistics. And he said, my wife came down and she said, Ed, you have a call from General MacArthur. And he laughed and he said, yeah, that's true. I'm sure I do. And she said, no, I'm not kidding. General MacArthur's on the line. So he answered the phone call and he said, I want you to come to Japan and help us rebuild the country after the bombing. And so Deming is really famous for how to improve work processes and how to make them continuous quality. So that I learned from Dr. Deming. And then when my PhD program at Claremont Graduate School, my major professor was Peter Drucker. And I was very lucky. So I have these 2 really great masters and that I was able to be friends with as well as learn from. And what I learned from Peter Drucker was really about leadership and management. But again, it was really all part of the way an organization runs. And what I really wanted to know more about, because my love in my heart is people. And I really wanted to understand, after I really started working in organizations, why can't we just all get along? What's going on in the culture? And so I wrote the book because I realized a real parallel between my life's personal scars and scars in organizations. And that's really what the book is about. It's how do you heal, not only as a person, but how do you heal an organization? And it was a great journey to write the book. So I'm delighted to be here this evening.
Sure. Is this your first book?
It is my first book. It is very exciting. I've always just worked, and I've done a lot of consulting, had my own company for many, many years, worked with lots of different companies. And then I decided, well, of course, the pandemic helped. It kind of puts your brakes on. So I said, okay, during the pandemic, I want to do something useful. So I wrote a book.
I want to do something useful. Well, that is for sure the thing to do, is write a book.
This is my pandemic book.
How long did it take to write it?
It took 18 months.
Was it tough for you? So this is about the art of scars, right? So you're kind of weaving your personal story in with how you can heal an organization's culture and change their climate, maybe their character as well, if an organization has character.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, did you ever get into flow when you were in it? Did you struggle with it? Because there's a little bit of your story in there, right? Like that's at the very beginning of the book, which is very powerful. We can hit on that too. But I mean, writing a book, I mean, it's pretty big. It's not something that's very small. I mean, that's 200 pages with references and resources.
I love all your thinking about flow, because you know the guy who wrote the first book on flow teaches at Claremont, which is where I got my doctorate. And I'm very interested in the whole thing of flow. And the way I got into flow to write the book was during the pandemic. I needed to really just be in flow. So I checked into a hotel, and nobody was in the hotel except me. There was nobody there. This is like April or May of 2020. So you can imagine nobody was there, just me. And they didn't have any food. They didn't have any housekeeping. They didn't have anything. They just said, we can have a room, but there's nothing around. It's just the room. And so I said, well, I don't want to leave. You know, I'm going to be here for like 3 weeks. And so I just want to be in there. And so that's what I did. And it was phenomenal. It just really helped me. I could sleep and get up and write, and sleep and get up and write. And I did that for 3 weeks, and came out with the chapters, came out with the outline, came out with what I really wanted to say about scars, my own personal scars and scars in organization. But it was definitely a flow experience. And when I heard some of your other interviews and you talked about flow, I thought, you know, that's really what happened. I got into flow. I don't think I could have written it if I hadn't.
Yeah, connecting with that one mind, almost that one mind of, I say, consciousness, right? Like it's, you know, I think you're referencing to me. I can't ever say his name. Mikai Csikszentmihalyi.
Yeah, the guy with the C guy.
Yeah, the flow states. I love it.
Yeah.
I think it's touching the universe. That's like connecting with that flow, that source, and like this thing comes through you, right? Like a book comes through you, like this conversation comes through us. Like I get in flow every time I have a conversation with somebody on this podcast. I mean, I don't prep. I mean, I read the book, right, and I go off the energy, but there is group flow. Mikai Csikszentmihalyi talks about that. Stephen Kotler talks about group flow, and I rely heavily on the universe to point me in the direction where to go. I mean, that's what I know for myself, right?
Yes, and I do too. I'm a yoga teacher. That's another thing I do. So I'm a pianist and a yoga teacher on the side. That's my hobby. Mm-hmm. But the whole thing about consciousness and subconsciousness, and you've read the book, and you know I talk a lot about the subconscious and the conscious, but the superconscious, the universe, is really what helps me stand back. That's my standing back, you know, and looking at, well, I'll tell you that my conscious name is Kathy. My subconscious is called Kathy Jan. And that's the person that's hardwired inside my mind. And she's totally programmed. She's totally subconscious. She's like a computer software program. She's very knee-jerk. She reacts just like your subconscious is. And so my subconscious is Kathy Jan, and my conscious is Kathy. And I've named my my sort of the universe. I named it May, M-A-E.
May.
And the reason I did is because my best friend was named that, and we were always really connected at the heart. And she died about 10 years ago, and we were friends since we were 5 years old, just for many, many, many years. And there was never anything, we were always really close. And so I call it May. And so when I go for walks in the morning, there's 3 of us. It's May and Kathy Jan. We all go and we have conversations. But it's really one person, and it's really beautiful.
I was born in May.
Oh, well, that's a good one.
Who talks the
That's
most
good.
out of all three of you? Who talks the most? Who I guess May would be the silent one, right? That silent knowing, that awareness, right?
May
And
is, I have to invite May. It's funny that you should ask that question because I have to invite her because I have to realize I have to, well, number one, I have to quiet Kathy Jan down because as you know, there's a voice inside you that never shuts up.
mm-hmm.
And she never shuts up. She just talks constantly, around the
And she's
clock.
probably mean, right?
Sometimes, but she really wants to protect me. She's the one, our ancestors that, taught us how to run away from tigers and taught us how to protect ourselves. So she's really there to protect me. But it's kind of gotten all screwed up over the years because, there aren't any more tigers. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of other things. And so she tries to protect me. Oh, watch out for that. Don't go there. Don't go. It's dark out there. Don't get in the car out there. Don't go for a walk tonight. I mean, she's really noisy. So what I have to do is invite May. And then I usually tell Kathy Jan to go to the beach, take a towel, and lay down in a chair. And I listen to May.
That's pretty amazing. What does May tell you?
It's fascinating because as I take my daily walks, I usually say, I want to know, I want you to give me some idea of what I need to learn today, where I need to be of service, where I need to learn to love myself, but where I need to serve others. And I want you to show me. And so it's always different. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I always walk to town. I live about 3.5 miles from town. So I walk to town and walk home about 5 days a week because it's just a good exercise. And it's beautiful. I live in North Carolina now, and it's just, in the Smoky Mountains. And so it's just gorgeous. So anyway, I told May, I said, I'm here. I hear you. And I want you to show me, show me what I need to do today. So I was walking down Main Street and I ran into this guy that I knew was a cook at a restaurant. And he's a really big, kind of overweight guy. And he had his little dog with him who was a little tiny dog, but he was a little tiny dog. And he said, I said, well, hi, John. And I said, what's your dog's name? He says, this is Sweet Georgia Brown. And I said, well, she's really a cute dog. And I said, how long have you had her? And he said, well, she's 13. I said, oh, that's good. You've had her a long time. And he said, I got your book because I had given him the book. He said, I got your book. And he said, what's it about? And so May basically said to me, talk to him. So I stopped and it was sprinkling. It was kind of raining. I stopped and I said, well, it's about scars and it's about healing and it's about those fears that you have and those fears that get inside you and how you get them out and how you make them conscious. Get rid of those fears so that you can be a light to everybody. And big, huge tears started falling down his face. And I was so surprised. And he said, you're making me cry. And I said, okay. And I said, so what is your fear? He said, I love Sweet Georgia Brown. And I'm afraid soon she's going to die. And she's all I have. So I said, well, let's talk about it, John. I said, that when you have something broken inside you, 3 things happen. First, you get that fear that really makes you hurt like hell because you think, okay, Georgia Brown's going to go. And then I said, then you can start thinking about, well, if I want Georgia Brown's sister, how do I do that? And he said, I never thought about that. And I said, well, maybe you should talk to Sweet Georgia Brown before she dies and find out a good name for her sister. And so that the 2 of you can go out and get her sister after she dies. And then the last phase of healing is that you have a wound and you'll always love her. But where the scar is, you're stronger. And once you have had that love and once you have that strength, you'll be stronger next time. Well, John just put his big arms around me and hugged me, and tears are rolling down his face. And he said, it's just what I needed to hear today.
I love that, how things work out, right? Or things.
So that, yep.
Things are.
And so that's what May does. She just points me.
Points you, and then you kind of just feel it and go with it. Don't question it. Yes. Just kind of know. It's a knowing, and inside, like an innate knowing of you need to go in this direction, like an intuitive feeling.
It's an intuitive feeling, but I think there's something else too, especially when you brought up flow. I think it's a flow. I mean, I was in flow. I knew immediately that that was what I needed to do. So once you see it, and once you know what the universe is telling you, you know it. Your heart knows it, and you know it.
I'm sure you experience flow when you're playing the piano.
I do.
And then yoga, right?
I do. Yes.
Have you ever attained like yoga? So like I'm just learning about yoga. Like, I mean, I've done yoga, right? But I've a lot of the texts that I read, I don't know if yoga is the same meaning. Like in India, some of the texts that I read are like that, connecting with oneness. They call them yogis that are doing this type of yoga, then they're experiencing higher levels of consciousness. But then I see yoga mainstream America. Like, is it the same thing? Is it like, what is the difference? Like, I don't know.
Well, I got my yoga training later in life because I was just, the universe told me to do it, and I did it, and went through 500 hours of training. But I would say 400 hours of that training was about philosophy. And that's really how I learned about my consciousness. I learned about my subconsciousness. I learned how to meditate. I really learned, I think one of the things that I really learned was the remarkable connection between mind, body, and spirit. And that's really what we're talking about anyway. But I learned that in yoga. And I don't think I knew that before. I mean, I knew about scars and I knew organizations, but I don't think I'd ever put together that body, living body, which I call an organization a living thing. It's a body of people. And I say, but they have mind, body, and spirit. And I really learned that in yoga. One of the really good books, if you want to read a really good book on yoga, to me, is called The Buddha's Brain. And I think that was one of we had to read a whole lot of things, but to me, that was one that really touched me and helped me understand how to link mind, body, and spirit.
We talked about teaching you how to meditate. So when you're doing the motions or you're doing the poses, right? Like you're doing breath work with that, and you're stretching and you're being in the moment, in the now, in the body. What is your mind doing? How do you meditate during that pose?
The best way I can tell you is that I stand back. Kathy Jan has learned to be quiet during yoga. She has to go and sit in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
So I put Kathy Jan away. But what I do is watch myself. And I watch myself so that mind, body, and spirit is all together. It's like an observer. It's like my roommate inside. I'm watching myself, and I'm calming myself down. So it's another person. I become another person, and I don't have these thoughts about work or thoughts about anything else. I'm just present.
Have you ever obtained have you ever gotten to that, I guess they call it samadhi or anything like that? That is that oneness feeling. I mean, you talk about you become the observer. Is it the awareness? Is that what connects you to higher levels of consciousness?
It is. It's the observer, but it's also the quieting. it's also the calming. I've practiced with several different gurus. There was one called Sadhguru, and he has a ashram outside of Nashville, Tennessee. He's from India, but he has an ashram there. And I've been to several of his 4-day sessions. And one of the ones I went to was 4 days long, and there were 1,000 of us, and we slept under one tent.
Oh.
So we got to be pretty much one. And it was Indian music and everything was very much from India. And that wasn't who taught me yoga. That's after I became a teacher. But what I learned is that it's that being present. It's that mindset of just standing back and watching and being calm. That's very important. And I really do credit my health to that. And I think the healing, a whole lot of that has to do with the fact that I've learned how to be conscious. I've learned how to be aware. I've learned how to be present. And I equate awareness and consciousness and presence kind of together.
Yeah. I mean, see, a lot of people get caught up on terminology, right? Like I do too. Like I get caught up on terminology, and because of that's what we use to communicate. If you don't have the experience, if you don't have the knowledge of how to describe a state of being, you're going to listen to what other people say. You hear awareness, you hear presence, you hear moment, you have, all of these different terminologies. But like, once like I am recently experiencing that awareness, like just meditating, like breathing, kind of just sitting with it and just noticing the observer. Like, and the way that I do it is this: I ask the question, and I can't take credit for this. So it's like the lady who wrote The Secret, she has a new book called The Greatest Secret, I think it is. I can't remember her name, but she's like, ask yourself the question, am I aware? And then in that moment, I can catch it where, yes, I'm aware. I'm aware of where I'm at. I'm aware of where I'm sitting. I'm aware of just being. And when I can get into that realization, like there's a flooding of like a gentle happiness comes across, right? Like you're touching the universe. Like you're just, at first it's like you dip your toe into it. And then as you get better at it, which I'm not even there yet, but that's why I continuously meditate, is to expand that consciousness. Is I think that essentially you learn how to live in it more, right? Like you, instead of falling asleep into the trade downs, like the subconscious or ego, I can kind of step back and be like, catch things, be the observer more so, like see the anger or see the fear or see the anxiety, and then not deal with it, but kind of honor it, right? And just say, but this isn't, the body isn't me. The body isn't who I am. Like the body will someday be gone, but the awareness will always be. Like the awareness will always be.
And I love the word you use. I love to use that word, notice. You just notice, and you keep noticing. And because one of the things I cover in my book is that I talk about when you have a fear, and I talk about how do you call upon that noticing, and that to me that's really the challenge, because usually those hardwired fears that are in us are so hardwired. We have an amygdala hijack, which means we just get hijacked, and that's the fight, flight, or freeze. And we're either out of there, or we're arguing with somebody, or we're frozen like a statue. So you have to catch that and notice pretty much right away.
Sure. We're so used to like living outwardly, right? Like to use our senses to identify things in the world and see and feel. And that's why our lips are so sensitive. That's why our noses are so sensitive. Our eyeballs, our skin, like that's how we perceive the world that we live in, is through our senses. It's like, I'm learning how to live inside of myself, inside of that in my own consciousness and my awareness, like turning inward and living in that world. Like I'm trying, you know what I mean? Like I'm not trying. I am.
Definitely. Well, I was thinking when I was listening to one of your podcasts, I was thinking, I haven't ever said this to anybody, but somebody ought to do it. We talk about intergalactic, going out into space. I think we need an intragalactic.
Mm-hmm. The universe is inside of us, right? So I mean, it'd be the same
right
thing.
And I think that's what we need to talk about. I think that, and that's what you're saying.
Sure.
I'm learning to go in rather than to go out here.
Yeah, because we're conditioned, right? Like since kids, happiness is outside of us. You have to go outside of the nuclear family dynamics to be happy, to go out and be successful and to leave the home, fly the nest, go out into the world. But yet the world is inside of you. So how do you leave the nest? You don't. You just take a leap of faith.
You do, but I'm really proud of what you're doing because it's a wonderful journey, isn't it?
Oh my, it's so like, it is a wonderful journey. And thank you for taking notice. I really appreciate that, Kathy. I mean, and right back at you, right? Like, I mean, you're doing great things as well. You have this book and I love the Art of Scars, like the idea and concept behind that with the pottery too, the art of that art form and your journey has been up, if you look back at it. So let's talk about that, right? Enough about me. Let's talk about you. So
tomorrow we'll talk about you.
Yeah, sure. At the very beginning of the book, you talk about your journey, right? It's a tough one and you have some scars. Let's talk about those scars. How did they develop?
I'll kind of give you the short version, condensed book version. So when I was 2, I had spinal meningitis. So I was a sick little kid. And then at 6 years old, I got cancer. So it was interesting because I have a big long scar. I know this is not necessarily, everybody can't see it, but it goes all the way down my arm. It's like a runner. And when you're in the first grade, you don't want to have weird things on your body. And so I was really embarrassed. And so I used to wear long sleeves so nobody could see my scar. And then one day, a little girl saw my scar and she said, "Wow, look at that." And she said, "Can I touch it?" And I'm thinking, well, and so I let her touch my scar. And then she's just telling all the other little kids, "Kathy's got a scar." And so they all looked at my scar. And so I started charging $0.25.
Entrepreneur out of the gate.
And so it was so funny because I started to see that it didn't kill me. I started to see that I was still alive and that not only was I alive, but that people thought I was unique. They thought I was unique because I had this runner going down my arm. And so I followed that and the kinds of things. Then my dad died when I was really young. And that was a huge scar. And I said to myself, I'm going to rise above this. I know how to do this. I rose above that. Then I went on with my life and my son was killed. He was killed at 20. And then because of his death, my husband died. And because of all of that, I got cancer. So it's kind of like boom, boom, boom. And it all happened right then. And I thought, I'm still going to be here. But there was something in me, Trey. And about then is when I remembered that my discussions with Dr. Denning, because he knew so much about Japanese, he had talked about the Kintsugi base. And he said, Kintsugi base, the whole theory behind wabi-sabi or the Kintsugi base is that there's imperfections in the world. And you need to accept the imperfection and realize that change is okay. And then you can go forward. And then if you look at the vase is this beautiful, this can be a beautiful vase, but it's been broken and filled in with gold. And he said, that's what organizations can do. And I thought, that's what I did. because what scars do is they are even stronger than your skin. So I started talking to my doctor and I said, so tell me about scars. And he said, well, first they hurt like hell. So when you first get a scar, it hurts really bad. And then it goes through a proliferation stage where all your cells get together and they start healing it. And it doesn't look very pretty, but it starts healing. And then before you know it, it heals over. And the skin that it heals over is a maturation stage, and it's stronger than anything else in the body. So I thought, that's it. We are kintsugi vases that have been broken because everything breaks. If you look at the second law of thermodynamics, everything breaks. And if you just kind of get that up front, like I figured out for me, I broke and broke and broke and broke and broke, but I'm still here. Mm. And I'm filled with gold because I'm different. I'm unique. And everybody's unique. It's just that some people don't realize it. And they don't take advantage of it. Maybe it was because I charged a quarter to see my arm.
Yeah, you were making profit early.
That's right.
Wow. Well, you said something in there that caught my ear. You were like, because of, and again, I'm sorry for the losses, but because of the losses, you got cancer, right? Explain that. Unpack that. Because of this. Was it because of the mindset, like what Bruce Lipton talks about, what epigenetics, the thought creates the environment?
I totally think that's what happened. I totally believe that it's almost, and I've never said this either, but it's almost like I expected it. I mean, I felt so broken after my son was killed at 20. He was killed right after 9/11 and in a car wreck. And then my husband died when I took care of him for almost 2 years with a terrible form of cancer. And then I just felt like I was broken, and I didn't catch it quick enough. And that's what I'm saying about that noticing. I didn't notice quick enough that I was really emotionally ill. And when you get emotionally ill, I so believe Bruce Lipton. I just went to see him in Taos about a month ago. And he's amazing. He's amazing, because I totally believe that we make ourselves sick. And so I did. And now I know to watch for the signs. I know how to notice. But I just don't think I yet figured that out. I knew that I could rise up above it, but I didn't do it quick enough.
Yeah, well, you can see things in your body. You notice that, right? Like, stress, right? Like, I mean, for years, like I was struggling with stress in my body and not understanding. Like, we always write it off as genetics. So, we look at I was always under the belief of, the doctors asking me what my family history was. There's a good probability that I'm going to experience what they had. But it's like the more that I research, the more that I look at what Dr. Bruce Lipton has done in his work, and Joe Dispenza and his work, the mind creates a lot of that illness, a lot of that. Your belief systems create a lot of that. Your stress creates a lot of that, like dis-ease in the body, creating these chemical reactions that are cortisol going to these areas. Like if you have stress in your gut, you're going to experience a lot of the dis-ease of energy in those organs around that area, because it's energy, it's bad energy, and it vibrates and it spreads. And that's why meditation is so important. Yoga is so important, is to get into that moment, be aware of the moment, and allow it to just, like I said, that happiness that I was talking about, that soft happiness, is what clears you of like all that negative energy, and like where you can come back to center and kind of reset. Because like the one thing that book did talk about, The Greatest Secret, is, and I never really put this together, because I was always associating thought with emotion, like thought, emotion, right? But when you think about it, the emotion's usually already there in the body. It's just waiting. It's just waiting to come out, because you've suppressed it. So like when I feel angry and I express that anger, it's not because of that moment. It's because that it was already there in the body, and I'm surrendering to it and allowing it to show itself. Where it's like a walking, ticking time bomb, walking around, and if, you know, I see Kathy walking and I do something that instigates some type of confrontation, or if you're driving in traffic and you get behind somebody slow and you start stressing out and you start like getting angry, like that anger and that anxiety was already there. You just haven't dealt with it yet. And it just comes out because you can't take it anymore. Like it's not the thought and the emotion. Usually the emotion's already there. It's just waiting for itself to be expressed. And now it's kind of like when I get into that awareness, I can hold into that moment and be aware.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
It's like
that's
clearing
notice,
all
that
of that.
moment of notice.
It's clearing everything out. It's clearing it out.
Yeah.
It's getting it out of the body. So I don't have
Right.
it there anymore. And it's not immediate. Like you're still going to have emotions in your body. It just, things slowly start to not bother you. Like you start slowly becoming the witness in the moment, and you start seeing the drama play out, and you start watching the movie, and you start becoming aware of the movie, and you start seeing the scenes go by, and you're like, man, like a year ago, like I totally been losing my shit right now. But you know, I'm going to sit here and be calm and allow the scene to take place, and just notice that I am not this body, but I am the awareness, and I'm just watching it. It's not good or bad. I'm just here. And that's where like some good stuff comes out.
It's very good. The issue I find is that I can't always do that.
Oh, no.
You know,
no.
I'm still human. Every now and then, you know, the old Kathy Jan, you know, you know, she's dressed up, stomping around. She really is.
Well, you know, so me too, right? Like we all fall back asleep, right? It's just learning to be awake more. That's what it is, right? We're all human beings. We're all, and Dr. Wayne Dyer says it a lot, and I'm sure you got this from somebody else, but we're all just what is it? We're all spiritual beings having a human experience. Like,
right.
That's exactly what we're here to have, an experience. And so, like, is it right or wrong? No, it's the body. This vessel is having a reaction to a conditioned belief system, or a conditioned expectation, and it's not happening in your favor, or it's not happening in the way that you want it to. And so you're having a chemical reaction in this mechanism of a body. But it's just to realize that you're not that, right? Like just when you have it, right? Like depending on what the situation is, if it's a deep emotion, like if it's a depression, or if it's sadness or grief, but just, I guess, recognizing that and not suppressing it, but recognizing it and being there, and be forgiving of it, or not forgiving of it, or just being accepting it, right? Like in your case with your husband and your son, right? Like I can't even imagine the amount of grief that you had to go through, right? And then there's still that sadness, I'm sure, right? But we're human beings, and to suppress it and not deal with it and not just like push it away is not the right answer. I don't think. I think you have to, like Ram Dass is like, grieve, allow yourself to grieve. Don't push it away.
Well, see, to me, that's the message.
It.
That's the message with the Kintsugi days, because it says the scars still show. You know, they're golden. So I still have those scars, but they've given me strength. And what came for me is, I said, my scars give me wings. And that's how I feel, is that those experiences that I've had give me the opportunity to fly above. In the conversation that you and I've been having, it's almost like connect with the universe.
Sure.
It gives me the ability to say, okay, I'm here. I could be here for John the other day when he talked about Sweet George Brown. You know, and it's his heart hurt just like mine did. I mean, we all hurt in different ways. You know, whether it's your dog or your son, or whether or not you like the job. I mean, it doesn't matter. All those things hurt. Now, the thing that you said that I found very interesting is that in my training, and part of my training with Bruce Lipton was that that's a thought. That thought happens because it's hardwired, and it's like this little trigger, this little thing that says, "Uh-oh, I have a fear," and it's this fear that starts hijacking, and then it grabs an emotion, it grabs a feeling, And those feelings are always there, but that particular hardwired memory, that thought grabs this emotion. And if you don't do anything about it, it can make you sick, and it can just bring you down and bring you down and bring you down. So what I learned from Bruce Lipton was 4 words. First, you have the thought. Then you have this feeling of like that, like that emotion. And then what you do is you move it into your consciousness and you put it into words. You communicate it. And so for me, that's the third thing, is you put it into words. Because once you hear it yourself say it, it's kind of like I name it.
Yep.
Then I can't avoid it anymore. And then once I name it, then I act upon it. So thought, feeling, words, action. And then what you can do is you can, and then it looks like the little Wizard of Oz that was hiding behind this, hiding behind the screen.
I'm behind the curtain.
Hiding behind the curtain. There was nothing to him. Because fear is, is false evidence appearing real. It always feels so real. But once you drag him out of there and you expose him, and then especially name him, then you can get rid of him. But that you have to do that over and over, because there's all these little things that we have hardwired in our system since we were little.
We have ancestral DNA memory. Like we have, like you talk about just your own conditioning and memories. Like I have DNA genetic memory in my body from my ancestors, like that are probably, that's the reason why it's like that innate fear of the tiger, right? From generation to generation, it's in your body.
Right. It's in your body.
And you go into the right environment and those fears are triggered because it's how the species has survived over generations. And it's just in your genetics. So it's like, you're already fighting that, right? Like when you come into this world, you're fighting those innate qualities that make us human beings that have helped us survive. But like you were talking about, the 4 things, right? Naming it, you identify it. You can say, oh, fear.
You give your consciousness the control. And that's what I loved from Bruce Lipton, because he said our subconsciousness, which where all that hardwired stuff lives, it's all of our ways that we react when we see something, it triggers us. But that's the thoughts and the feelings. But once you bring it up, our subconscious is 95% of how we behave. I mean, we don't think about how we brush our teeth or comb our hair or get dressed. I mean, it's all just rote. But what Bruce says is that the 5% of your consciousness, because it's 5% of consciousness, 95% of subconsciousness, that 5% of awareness then begins to get you into the consciousness and the super consciousness, which is all powerful. So once you can name it and claim it, then you can do something about it. Yeah. And you realize how tiny it is. But when it's inside you, it feels like the Himalaya mountain.
Yeah. Well, it's the chemical reactions that you're feeling. It's like that. It's as strong as the pharmaceutical drugs that we pump into our bodies, like that, like the dopamine that I feel when I achieve a goal, the endorphins that I feel when I run, the cortisol that I feel when I'm anxious. Like those things make me feel like either the world is on fire or I have just achieved a great success. And it's like, you believe these things, but what is reality? What is reality really? Right.
Right. I mean, the reality is the present. It's your consciousness, and it's the super consciousness that you can bring in. We have that power.
Yeah. Yeah. Kathy, I can't even believe like time is flying here.
Well, I could talk to you for a long time after I heard what you talked about. I mean, and I think the reason I wrote the book, Trey, was I really wanted, because I'm also a corporate gal. I've worked with all these big corporations and they would think I was full of it. Mm-hmm. If I go in and I told the CEO, let's just meditate, that wouldn't go over well. However, what I've tried to do is I've tried to take my processes of how I know to heal an organization and put them in the same framework, so that I'm actually introducing all of this without having to say, if you meditate or if you think of the superconscious, but that's what we do. Because I tell them, you have to get the vision. You have to understand. You have to talk to the people, and together, collaboratively in a collective, you have to know where you really want to go. That's pretty supernatural.
So you're like almost doing like a group visualization, law of attraction deal with corporations.
Oh, I do that all the time. I've done it for all these years that I've worked. And you know what? It's amazing. It works out so amazing.
So they're collectively sitting there visualizing their goals as a unit or as an organization, and then bringing it into the reality.
Yes.
Phenomenal.
So I'm having them do that as a group, because I believe leadership and working. Well, I just believe an organization is just like an individual. It's just so we're a bunch of cells, and I think organizations are a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you just take the analogy, they break like that too. So what I have to convince them of is that once they're broken and they're filled in with gold, which I can teach them how to do. I can teach them how to fill in with gold, because I know how to do that. But I hadn't ever made the connection until I really saw the Kintsugi days, because what it really does is it really helps me give the people in corporations, if you look at this, it's even more unique and more valuable because it's had experience and because it has gold filled in. Then they get it. So I ask them, what's your base? What do you look like? What is your unique presence in the world?
I like that.
I think one of the things that I was most proud of, one of my jobs, was I was working with in Boise, Idaho, with the university, and we had them come up with this collective vision, and this was 10 years ago. And the collective vision was that we want to be a metropolitan research university of distinction. Well, number one, Boise wasn't exactly metropolitan, and it really wasn't a research university, and they really weren't distinct. But guess what? They lived into it. Now Boise's going like crazy. It's one of the better universities. They've gotten hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars because they believed they could. But the key there is they said, one of the things we have to focus on is we've been putting all our time and attention in on the freshmen and sophomores because we don't have a community college. So together we decided, well, let's spin off a community college, and we did. So I helped them spin off a community college. It opened 8 years ago. They now have 38,000 students.
Wow.
And they're not part of the university anymore. So they're over here doing what they need to do. And the university's over here so they can be a research university. They can become this base. And so if you could, again, what am I doing? I'm naming it.
Sure.
You know, name it. Name what it is, and then act on it.
Name it. Can you name the thing? Right. So that it doesn't only just work with emotions, but it works with creating what you want. Name it. So what is something that you've named that you have created or brought into your reality? Or manifest it. Yeah. Or manifest it.
Oh my goodness. So after my husband died, I said, I'm really too young to live by myself for the rest of my life. And so I'm going to meet somebody. And how can you meet somebody? It's hard to meet anybody.
Kathy, you're a beautiful woman. I mean, you're a beautiful young woman. How are you not going to meet somebody?
Well, but I was always working. So I went online, and I said, I'm not going to go online. And one of my girlfriends said, yes, you are. We're going to do it together. So she sets me down, and we had a couple of drinks. And by the time I was done, but I met, and I dated several people. But so 4 years after my husband died, I met a great guy. I moved from Boise, Idaho to North Carolina. He was a school teacher in Manhattan. He moved here too. So, I mean, it was like I would have never met him had I not decided that this is what I want to do. You know, and I don't know where he is. I don't know who he is. I don't know what it looks like. I just know I just don't want to be by myself the rest of my life.
Beautiful.
Then I've manifested, I decided I wanted a house in the mountains. And I knew what kind of money that took. And so I had to find a job. And so I got a really good job that really paid for the house in the mountains. So I have a house in the mountains. So I think you just have to decide what's your vision. And you know that it's broken. You know that you've been broken, but you're filled in with gold. So the opportunities are all out there. All you have to do is take them.
I love it.
Name them and take them.
Name them and take them.
Yes.
I love it. Kathy, how can people find out more about you?
Well, they can go on my website. It's kathyhagler.com. And it talks about my book, Art of Scars. It also gives them, I'm also doing a lot on social media. My company is K2OHSOLUTIONS. It's based in Boise, Idaho. I have a business partner. Her name is Kathy Opp. And she and I are working with lots of different kinds of companies and people. I'm doing right now, I kind of took myself out of the picture for a little while to write the book, but now I'm back in. I just got a new contract last week with George Washington University, and I'll be doing some work in DC.
Ooh.
So it's just, that's how they can find out about me. Awesome. Through my website.
Author of The Art of Scars. Fantastic conversation, Kathy. I can't thank you enough for joining the show.
Thank you.